And so, yeah, the charge of racist has been ineffectually dealt with since its inception. And what happened for me many years ago, roughly about 2 decades ago, when I was in the cause, I was a young man, and I was taking the advice of my elders about how to handle the anti-white ideology that was out there. Of course, they wanted to be either, there were really three options as far as handling the opposition, and that was using the very precise language. So they were either first wave feminists, or they were economic Marxists, or they were et cetera. Or there was the names, give them the names of their taking, communist, things like this. And then there, of course, were the slurs. So like you would have commie for communist, or even worse, people would use the slurs that the anti-whites had given us to use for them. Things like bleeding heart, things like fill in the racial epithet lover. So these sorts of things were ineffectual when I would try to persuade people to take up our position. And at the time, even back then, throughout my life, I've worked blue and white collar jobs. And when I would attempt to persuade people, it didn't matter. Their intelligence really didn't matter. Whether or not they were interested in politics really didn't matter. All of these approaches undermined me in my effort to persuade them in one way or another. And so I decided that I was just going to refer to the opposition as anti-white. There were a couple of reasons for that, and one of the reasons that I don't talk much about in that stream, although I do touch upon it, is that if there is such a thing as an anti-white, then that means that you belong to a people, and that is something that we lack.
Yes. Yeah,
so there's a psychological mechanism to this that is extremely powerful. But the element that I discuss in this video that ended up, I wanted to do like a 30 or 60-minute stream, ended up being 2 hours because people kept asking other information about this. But really, the problem is that all of the responses to racist leave the concept intact.
Yep.
Leave its power intact. So
exactly.
When I use anti-white as my rebuttal to racist,
they're not racists.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, I argue that we should never use the language of white oppression, and racist is one of the most powerful of terms.
Yeah.
So
it's funny that we've come to that same conclusion, sort of like independently of one another. We've both sort of converged on the same exact position, and even the word anti-white. I mean, I have only known you a short time, and we had similar conversations like 2-3 years ago where we were like, one of the worst cuck moves is appealing to the concept of racism, like saying that racism is a universal bad and trying to fit white people in under the aegis of racism is bad. But they've already excluded us from it. They have a ready-made narrative, which is white people, we all know what it is. White people can't be racist. It's privilege, it's power, it's whatever. They'll do a bait and switch on you. They'll mess around with the definitions. But the fundamental thing is you're not included in this path to power, which is calling people racist. And so I agree completely. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, go ahead.
No, it's great input. In fact, the racist, and I think this is how we have to be careful about it, is that it will take whatever definition the anti-white needs it to take in any particular context to be able to inflict harm on Western civilization. So what I would do, and this was for me, it was a learning by implementation. So when I would say to people, whether it was at my blue collar or white collar jobs, I would say, when I switched over, and I would say, look, these people are anti-whites. That's all they are. The response was their eyes would get huge. They would say, there's a name for the people who oppose us. I can now put them in a box like they put me in a box, and I can label that box. So there are a number of psychological elements here. First of all, you reduce all of your victimizers, and that's what they are, victimizers, into one category rather than having this plexiform of enemies out there that is intimidating. Of victimizers that are intimidating. So it empowered people to be able to talk about it. And then the ideology I refer to as anti-white-ism, because everybody understands ism at the end of a word, creates a concept with it. And so for these blue-collar guys, for these white-collar guys, they are working, they're paying their bills, they're dealing with wives, they're having arguments with children that are being bad. They need the information as compact as possible and as swift as possible in a way that they can get it and then reapply it to their context, to their friends, to their family. So when I went back to the people in the movement, when I went back to a man I respect immensely, like Dr. Pierce, and I said, hey, look, this anti-white and anti-whiteism is perfect. We've got to use this. It's working. I was ridiculed. I was told that the population wasn't going to take me and take us seriously if we spoke with a word that wasn't in the dictionary or a concept that wasn't in the dictionary. Others would say, well, it was just you weren't being disrespectful enough. You needed to call them a commie. You needed to call them this or that. But all of that deprived me of validity. All of that deprived me of believability when I was talking with people. This other thing worked. And I discovered, and this was by accident, by application, that when I argued with an anti-white or someone, a basic white person with basic white sensibilities who was just parroting anti-white positions, as soon as I said, oh, that's anti-white, I immediately won in every single case. I have never lost an argument or conversation with someone when I just put them into the anti-white box.
Yeah.
They always retreat. Now, I just say as a caveat to people who do this and who employ this, you will meet anti-whites out there that just vehemently hate us. And so they'll happily take on the moniker anti-white. When you come across them, just move on.
But
move on.
Even they're going to have some concern for optics, right?
Well, certainly when it gets on like a big, yeah. But with everybody else, if you're up against, if you're in a big argument and they say you're a racist, just immediately say you're anti-white. And this is the other thing about the term anti-white. It carries its own power just in and of itself, but it's also magnifiable by the intensity you put into it. So in other words, comb your hair, no matter how loud it's said, still just means comb your hair. Whereas anti-white, the more angry, the louder you say it, the more powerful it gets. And the softer you say it, it still carries its power in a different way. So you can be with a neighbor, say you want to persuade that neighbor, and he's saying something about bringing, the non-whites into the country or something like that. Don't argue with the typical, and this is what I suggest, this is how I win these conversations. Don't break out like all the data right away on the guy. Just instead say, that's really an anti-white position because that's changing our civilization. That's really, and you watch them backpedal. You watch them try to climb out of that anti-white box, and will carry your head away high from those discussions.
This is something I've observed over the last several years as well, and it is understanding what they've done to us and applying it back against them, because you see how everybody flees from anti-Semitism. You see how everybody flees from racism. Now we have our power word like that. It's our kill word, and it works. And I've seen it work because they have to now deny that they are anti-white. They have to, for the sake of optics. Or, and if they try to argue against the term, then you still win because now they're arguing on your terms. Because if they're like, they'll say either like, I'm not anti-white, I'm not anti-white, then they have to start proving it to you, or they have to start arguing against the idea that you could use that word. Which, again, we can now do the trick that they do and be like, well, you're kind of proving my point here, guy. By arguing against the term, you're kind of showing that you embrace it. And so it basically puts all, like, you're now in control of the conversation, which is the most important thing, because the main problem we've had for, I don't know how long, we have it now, we can debate how far back it goes, is that we don't control the conversation. We're reacting to the terms that someone else is setting. So we have to set our own terms of conversation. They have to adapt to us. That's one thing they really haven't liked about this sort of emergent new pro-white, alt-right movement, is that we're setting terms for them. And look, there's been ups and downs. There's been hills and valleys, whatever. There's been failures and successes. But the sort of the things that we can take away from the thing is that when we set the terms of the conversation and we don't back down, like Nicholas Sandman didn't back down, this is what they don't like, because they're so used to their kill words working, anti-Semitism, racism, so used to that working, that they're very extremely agitated by this. And I remember years ago, when Nathan D'Amigo was still doing, before he changed from Identity National Youth Front to Identity Road, but still National Youth Front, they did something that I thought was the most successful thing that they ever did, which is they found one professor at Arizona State who was one of these. He was even, I think he was white, or maybe he was part Jewish or something. It doesn't really matter. Ultimately, he was in the anti-white zeitgeist that they create in education. He was teaching some, perspectives in justice or something like that. I don't know, some oppression, anti-white studies class, effectively, right? I mean, that's another thing. We just call all of that anti-white studies because that's what it is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so they took his name and his face. They took some of his most egregious statements and started putting them on posters around the campus with the word anti-white like across his face.
Yeah.
And this caused a massive shitstorm. And the great thing was that they were reacting to it.
Yeah.
They ended up because typically if people will put up flyers or something like that, say there's like a racist message on them. Well, now that you just said what you've done is you put up a flyer that says, "I'm the bad guy, come and find me." There's a bad guy out here, and you don't know who it is, and that's bothering you. But when you put one up that's like, no, you're the bad guy, now they still had to react, and it actually caused them a problem. They had to do a press conference. Some donors pulled out, etc., because they exposed what he was saying, and they attached the label anti-white to him. And I think that was honestly, as much as, I think that works. I mean, we all love classical statues and Greek art and Romanesque and all. I love that stuff. But right now, this is a political war of words, and the most important thing is that I think was the best propaganda strategy I saw them do, and I wish that I think they're doing more of that. I've seen them start doing more of that, so that's great. But I think that's the kind of propaganda strategy we should employ. And the 100-handers is another thing. If you don't know these guys that distribute sticker templates. So if you buy a certain kind of sticker printer and you sign up for their mailing list, they'll send you templates of the stickers, and they're all they're sort of tested messages that work, and then you can put them around. They talk about anti-whiteness and things like that. So this is a really great rhetorical strategy, and it totally works. And it's also true because when you do talk to a white person that has this vague feeling that everything's against them and they can't ever win, no matter what kind of side they take on the, challah bread, the sandwich with a big thick chunk of challah bread on either side and some gefilte fish in the middle, they don't, it's how can I even enter this political discourse?